If your Procreate art looks shaky or wobbly, no matter what you do, maybe your Apple Pencil is trying to do the cha-cha all on its own volition, then it might not be you. It might be a settings problem, and lucky you, we can fix that. Hey, it's me, Cynthia. I help beginner digital artists learn the skills they need to create the art they can actually sell. Today, we're going to go do a deep dive on Procreate brush settings. Not all of them, just the ones that are actually going to make a difference to make your art look cleaner, cuter, and more what was in your head. I'm also going to tell you which setting beginners usually miss, and it's one that makes the biggest difference. So make sure and stick around for that. Here's what I see all of the time. Someone's in Procreate, they're drawing, they're whipping them up, popping them out, and something just looks off. It isn't behaving the way they expected, and their first thought is, I'm just not there yet. I'm not good enough yet. So they keep practicing, but the same thing keeps happening over and over. But here's what they're missing. If they understand just a few brush settings, their art can look noticeably better immediately. And that's definitely a win. So let's go through the 5 that matter most. Hey, Future Cynthia here. For some reason, my camera ate my voice, so we're gonna do a voiceover for this real quick, and hopefully we can match it up like, I don't know, peanut butter and jelly. All right, let's go. We're gonna go into our brush things, and I'm actually gonna create a new brush by tapping the menu and just going into it. That way, I'm not messing up any of my brushes, and I can show you exactly from scratch. And anytime you guys do go into one of your brushes and mess with the settings, let's go ahead and duplicate that brush so we're not regretting our life later and we can play with our duplicate. All right. So we are going to go into stabilization, and we are going to play with our streamline and our stabilization sliders. This is a big one, and this is the one most beginners completely miss. Streamline is Procreate's built-in line smoothing tool. What it does is it compensates for the natural wobble in your hand as you draw. And it's normal. We all have it. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. You know, sometimes your hands shake. And I've noticed, sometimes my hands shake more than others. Sometimes what I do with one brush, and one day I have to go in and play with my settings the next day. That's okay. So once again, you're just going to tap on your brush library, tap the brush again to open the brush settings, and look for the stabilization tab at the top. And streamline, we're going to put that somewhere between 50 and 70%. And you can play with those settings and just adjust based on how it feels. So you'll need to go back and forth a little bit like I am on the screen and just play with it and see how it feels. And you're going to do the same thing with stabilization. Now you will notice sometimes if you crank everything up too high, it has a little bit of a lag, and it's almost like you're breaking the line as you draw. Like your circle doesn't want to circle. It wants to stay kind of straight. So, I do have a love-hate relationship with the streamline and stabilization settings, and that's okay. We just go in, we practice, and we play with it. Whatever your sweet spot is, it may vary by brushes and it may vary by day. And this is going to matter if you're making art to sell, stickers, phone cases, mug, any kind of print on demand products. Clean lines can be very important. A shaky sticker doesn't look that great. So streamline is one of the simplest things and most important things you can do to level up the look of your work without all of a sudden, having extreme hand control and being super amazing. It's like a little shortcut. All right, let's go ahead and talk about opacity, which is going to be how translucent translucent, excuse me, your brushes. Now we do have the opacity slider on the side, so we can control some settings that way. And as you can see, this brush I made, it's, when you vary the opacity up and down, the opacity is going to change. This brush, as you'll see, it already has some opacity in the brush settings. So let's go in and take a peek at that. So let's go down to our brush dynamics first, because we do have an opacity slider in there. This one you're probably not going to mess with. To start, as you can see, it says speed, and you can change the opacity by how quickly you move your brush strokes, how quickly you use your Apple Pencil. But I just wanted to show you that this one is there, but you probably won't really be playing with this one right now. So where we want to go is into Apple Pencil settings, and we're going to go down to opacity. And as you can see, they have it 100% on this brush, which means the opacity is going to vary with the pressure I put on my Apple Pencil. So let's go ahead. As you can see, moving the slider is going to make this brush completely opaque. If you're going to go all the way down to 0, whoops, trying to zoom in isn't, or zoom out, I get those two confused, but nevertheless, it doesn't work in your brush settings. So with your slider completely on 0, you can move your opacity slider on the side of your Procreate canvas, and that's going to take your opacity down on your brush 100% even all the way across the board. There won't be any pressure sensitivity variations with your brush if you use the slider on the side. Now let's take a look at what happens when you adjust the opacity settings inside your brush settings. So I've lowered them, and as you can see, I have a lighter color, and as I go back over, it slightly darkens, and then if I add an additional color, I can go over it as well. I'm just going to go a little bit darker, but I can see some of my lighter color inside that, depending on how much pressure I put on my brush. So basically there's more transparency shining through because I adjusted it inside my brush settings, and I'm just gonna quickly kind of like smudge them together just a little bit so you can actually get an idea of why you might want to do that. It's really good to play with your opacity settings for things like a watercolor or just any kind of art where you're wanting a more blended, layered look to your artwork. All right, let's talk about size for our brushes again. So once again, we do have the bar on the side that's going to change the size of our brush, but these brush sizes are gonna go a little different. Let's just take, once again, a quick peek inside Dynamics, and this slider is just going to change a little bit the same way the opacity did. This is going to change with how fast your brush stroke is. So I'm just going to, just want to make you aware of it, but it's not really going to be something you're going to need to mess with so much right now. Going to be focusing on our Apple Pencil settings once again, and the size slider within it. So the more you go towards 100% on your slider, you can see the size of your brush moving, and this is going to change as
you draw your strokes on your canvas. And you can play with your slider back and forth. And you can see how your brush is having a slight taper depending on where you're putting your size on your slider. We also have a pressure curve graph here inside our settings. And it's going to control how your Apple Pencil pressure translates in your brush size. But basically, a steep curve is going to mean a bigger difference between light and heavy pressure on your Apple pencils. Your lines are going to go from thin to thick very dramatically, or with a steep curve, or a gentle flatter curve is going to give you a more consistent shift in your line width as your pressure varies. So this one I have to play with some, because sometimes I'll have like a fatter line and then all of a sudden it goes tiny and it just looks super weird. So you'll just go in and play with that a bit if you want to vary the size, which can be really great if some people just prefer to stick with more of a monoline with just a one line thickness all the way across, no matter what they're doing. I like to have thin lines. So just go in and play with that pressure curve and check your pen and see what your brush looks like on your canvas.
Hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time to do that. It's free, and I post videos about making and selling digital art. Hit the button so you don't miss anything.
So let's go into our stroke path tab and talk about spacing. Spacing controls the gap between each individual stamp of the brush as it moves across the canvas. So basically it's putting down a stamp super close together as your brush goes along the screen. So this is how you can quickly add dotted brushes or a bit more texture to your brush before going anywhere else. So you can get a really smooth line by having low spacing, or you see how as I increase the spacing, all of a sudden I have little circle dots as my brush. And you keep going further and further, and basically those individual stamps are just going to go further and further apart. And you can utilize the jitter menu as well. It's basically jitter is you're basically jittering your stamp around. You're making them move around further away from each other on the line you're drawing. Now, fall off is basically going to make your stroke path do just that. It's gonna fall off. It's gonna disappear. It's gonna go bye-bye. So for clean, professional looking art where you want a really solid line, pull that spacing slider down. And if you're looking for a more hand-drawn, sketchy, textured vibe, you can pull that spacing up to work really well for stickers and digital downloads. Textured painterly art is really good for, art prints, greeting cards, that handmade aesthetic. It really depends on your style and what you're looking for, but you're going to have a lot more control. All right, let's take a peek about how we can play with grain. I'm going to go into the source library of grain, and I'm just going to pick a simple grain to show you. Grain controls how textured versus how flat your brush looks. Uh, The more grain that's inside your brush is basically going to equal more texture. And if you don't have basically any grain or anything inside your brush, it's going to be look nice and smooth inside. But as you can see, this brush, I just added a grain source, and now I have all this texture inside my smooth brush shape. No grain is going to equal a cleaner, more graphic look. So, depending on your style, you might want to reduce the grain scale or just don't add grain completely, but you can definitely change the look of your brushes by adding a grain source to the brush. There's no right or wrong here, but knowing the options you have, it can help you decide the direction you're heading before you ever sit down and decide to draw.
Okay, so now you know the 5 settings that actually make the biggest difference in your brushes. Streamline, opacity, pressure curve, and Apple Pencil size, spacing, and grain. This already puts you ahead. Most people never even open brush settings. I never did when I first started. It's normal. And then you're sitting there fighting for your life where every single drawing just looks kind of meh. And sometimes the brush just isn't the right one. And that's okay too. It's all right to make changes and play and have a few favorites. But once you understand these settings, stop feeling like Procreate is randomly trying to pick on you, and you can start making art you actually like and enjoy. So, before spiraling down more brushes, locking your iPad away in the drawer, make sure to have a look at Streamline, opacity, your pressure curve, and Apple Pencil size. It's Apple settings. I'm not sure why I keep calling it Apple Pencil size. It's size in Apple settings. Your opacity and your grain first. Your future self is going to be just a little bit happier if you do, and so will your customers. And if you want extra beginner drawing help, I do have my Drawing Without Overwhelm workbook. I'll make sure and link it below. It walks you through some simple Procreate tips and exercises, some cute drawing prompts. There are over 40 to get you started, and some messy little confidence building wins so you can stop overthinking every single sketch and actually start creating stuff. So if this sounds good to you, make sure and check that out in the link below. Just remember, one tiny step at a time. We're getting better all the time, and I'm here, you're here, we're doing this together. Make sure, leave me a comment, let me know what your favorite brushes are and what you're going to try to play with. And one thing before I go, make sure and duplicate those brushes so we're not messing up any of our originals and forgetting what the settings were. Just a quick swipe will have you being able to duplicate your brush and save you from some extra tears later. That's it for me today, guys. Bye bye.